Let's start with the big picture. It's an area of low pressure that's going to be deepening, strengthening as it approaches the area. Swings us a warm front initially. You got more moist air ahead of the cold front that's likely to move into the area later tomorrow evening. There's a dry line also involved in this big setup. Severe weather here locally looks to be somewhat at a minimum, but this red here represents a level 4 potential. I'm afraid a severe weather outbreak likely. It does include parts of central and eastern Arkansas as well. We take a closer look into what we can expect across northwest Arkansas and the River Valley. We do have this level 1 very low potential. Let's have it a 5, right? So we're on the lower end of the scale that one or two of these storms, which are probably going to develop in our general neck of the woods across West Arkansas. I don't think East Oklahoma is going to get on the action, at least as of right now. As they develop, they're pushing towards the east quickly enough that I think it's going to be once they get off to the east outside of the 5 News viewing area that they're probably going to start to become severe there. May not be many of them, but certainly a few cells are going to be expected. Here's Futurecast. You can see that activity 1:30 developing off to the south and east. That's tomorrow afternoon. We'll watch for a couple of these showers in our neck of the woods, but you really see it get going right in this area, right? It's out of our neck of the woods, but certainly going to cause some problems for tomorrow evening in that part of the state. The big story, the big impact really is really high winds. 40 to 50 mile per hour gust. That's not sustained, but that's some gust. That's going to be common area-wide between about 11 o'clock and 8 p.m. tomorrow evening. In northwest Arkansas, there's going to be some higher wind gusts, 50 to 60. That can't be ruled out. So what is the impact of such strong winds? Isolated power outages, and we saw this last week when there was a similar setup. You remember that? It got really windy out there. I think it was last Wednesday. There weren't widespread power outages, but there were some, and I think it's going to be tough to rule that out entirely. Fire danger is a concern with this event more so than the last week's because we've got really dry air. The humidity's low. It gets lower behind that dry line tomorrow, and vegetation's just pretty dry. It's dead, it's dormant still. We've not seen a whole lot of rain, and that's a good recipe for some fire spread. Here's noon tomorrow. Winds 40 to 50 already by lunchtime. You get into the afternoon, and that's when we start to push closer to 60 in places like Rogers, getting into those numbers in northwest Arkansas, getting closer to 50 here in the River Valley. This is 5 p.m. tomorrow evening. They're all out of the south-southwest. Eventually, by tomorrow evening, they start to die down, and they'll shift back out of the northwest, and that's going to usher in some cooler temperatures for us this weekend. Here's that red flag warning again. It's in effect for pretty much all day tomorrow. It's the low humidity, the high winds, the dry vegetation. These red flag warnings, I think, caused a lot of concern. I got more messages about these today than I did the severe weather aspect. And so I want to address that. There's some fear. There's a little bit of anxiety relating to these red flag warnings. And I think a lot of it has to do with what we saw out in California earlier this year, and even South Carolina more recently. Look, we can't predict a fire. I don't think there's any reason to necessarily be concerned or scared, but we do have to be careful tomorrow. We probably shouldn't be a bozo and throw out a cigarette butt. Probably shouldn't let our chains drag behind our pickup trucks. If we're working heavy equipment tomorrow, probably ought to be mindful of sparks, and we certainly shouldn't burn, right? That's the key takeaway. If we all do our part tomorrow, I think we're going to be in okay shape. Let's talk about something fun. I like when science is fun. There is a lunar eclipse tonight. I think the clouds are going to cause us some problems, I'm afraid. Last night it looked decent. These clouds moving in a little bit slower. 1:58 is when the most special moment happens. That's totality. Red's going to have this blood orange hue to it. Kind of depends on how much dust is in the upper levels of the atmosphere. But 1:58 here locally. Let's take a look at the clouds. Here's where they're at right now. The backside running pretty much parallel with I-44 back over towards Tulsa. The backside of these clouds are thin, high-level clouds that sometimes you can see through, right? And I'm really hopeful that these things can get on scooting off to the east, and maybe we can look through those high clouds if you want to wake up in the middle of the night tonight. A lot of folks saying, Scott, it's so warm, I can't help but want to get out and work in the garden. You can work in the garden, but I wouldn't plant yet. The average last freeze, northwest Arkansas, April 16th. March 26th in the River Valley. Hold on. You probably want to wait a little bit longer. 10-day forecast, weather impact alert in effect for tomorrow. It's not that storm potential, only about a 20% chance of that coverage. I think a lot of us are dry, but we're all going to be windy. I've maintained a slight chance of a shower Saturday morning, only about a 20% chance. That's new to the forecast this evening. 60s this weekend in northwest Arkansas, back in the mid to upper 70s next week. In the River Valley, 83 and windy tomorrow. Slight chance of a spotty shower to storm. We'll watch for those to develop in the afternoon and evening before they move off into central Arkansas and likely become a bit more severe over in that part of the area. 72 Saturday, down into the 60s and sunny by Sunday.